the state hearse still on its way, still with people on each side of the road, not going along the motorway but coming through the ordinary main roads. It'll go through the town centres before it gets to Windsor. And at Windsor, in the chapel, much congregation already sitting waiting for this family funeral. People who were close to the Queen, worked for the Queen, many again with the Royal Victorian Order medal. And there'll be music played, but the service doesn't actually begin for another hour and a half, and that hour and a half will be taken up with the procession up the Long Walk. A procession very like the one we saw in London, with the pipes and the drums and the bands and all that sort of glorious jewel-like surrounding of the coffin as they come up the Long Walk and into this west door, under the huge window, one of the largest stained glass windows in Britain, and the coffin will be borne up the steps and into the nave. The music's going to be played. It's interesting, the music they're going to play. There's one particular composer who was the organist here at the chapel, who not only played the organ here, but has also provided music for the service itself. And he was here from the 30s until the 60s. The Queen herself used to go up into the organ loft there to listen to him play. And it's said that he actually taught Her Majesty the piano. Sir William Harris is called. But there's music also by Bach and Herbert Howells, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, modern music from Judith Weir, the current master of the King's music, Elgar Vaughan Williams, all those famous British composers. But for the moment, it seems they sit in silence and just talk to each other. The banners of the Knights of the Garter. Now, interestingly, the 1000th Knight of the Garter, would you believe, was the Prince of Wales, who was Prince William then. He was appointed in 2008, the 1000th Knight of the Garter. It goes back centuries, and it's in the gift, or was in the gift of the sovereign, only given to people who've distinguished themselves in public life. Not all men. There are women, ladies of the Garter, they're called as well, and their banners hang here during their time when they're alive, when they come every year to this service here for the Garter, and then on their death the banner's taken down, but the seat that they have below in the choir, those brass plaques you can see, are there to commemorate their time as members of the order. There are 700 or 800 of them left here. Some have been taken down because history disapproved of them, others have just fallen down. But otherwise, this extraordinary panoply of the Knights of the Garter, whose chapel this is, and the man responsible for all this is the most senior herald, Garter King of Arms, who made the principal proclamation of the King in St. James's Palace earlier this week, and here today will perform one of his final duties, which is to read out the Queen's styles and titles at the very end of the service. Garter King of Arms, and with the heralds, who nowadays play a mainly symbolic role at state occasions, but in the past were figures of controversy who had to decide who was entitled to call themselves what and who owned what land, and got caught up in all kinds of shenanigans. But now, as so many of the people that we see in the most brilliant colours here enlivening these occasions, is actually there simply as a formal role which they play.
Now, someone who knows Windsor very well is the writer and historian William Shawcross. He's taken the time to join us. We're very grateful for that. You've spent a lot of time here. Sometimes it's been social times and sometimes it's been working times. We'll come to that in a second, but today, as somebody who spent a lot of time in the company of the Queen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to exaggerate and boast and say it was a lot, but I had an incredible honour from the Queen, she asked me to write the official biography of her mother.
And there was a 6-year period where you
years.
researched and wrote that.
Much of that time in this wonderful castle in the round tower behind us, which is where the Royal Archives are.
Right.
And it was an extraordinary joy to read all these letters that had never been written, probably since they were never been read for 50, 60 years.
But didn't you spend time consulting with the Queen and saying, this is what I've found and what do you make of that and is that accurate? So you would take tea with her and you would exchange your research and ask for her opinion?
Yes, she would ask me to tea either here or sometimes at Balmoral, if that was, my wife and I went to stay there several times. But you're right, and I would say, look at this letter, ma'am, do you remember this? And she would say, oh yes, this is why I wrote that, or this is why my mother wrote this to me, or to so-and-so. I got to know her. I was, as I say, very privileged, and I'm lucky to do so.
I mean, you're a very distinguished writer, but that must have been quite nerve-wracking.
It was, but nerve-wracking in theory, but actually the first time after I'd met her, I realized what an extraordinarily kind and gentle person she was, and she always put everybody at their ease. There was never any side to her. It was always gentle and wise and incredibly decent in every sense of the word.
So you had access to this archive and there were letters between the Queen and the very young Queen and the Queen Mother. I need to ask you a question that has been bothering me because I've read it in 2 or 3 books, which is, during the war, did the Queen Mother sign her letters "Tonk cold fruit and down with the Nazis"?
She did.
She did?
She did. She didn't sign all her letters like that.
Okay.
If she was writing to the Queen, to Princess Elizabeth, she would say, "With much love from your loving Mama."
Right.
But to friends and cousins, not all of them, and certainly not to a formal letter, she would say, "Tinkety tonk and down with the Nazis."
Right.
And she had this wonderful habit of raising her glass to people she loved and say, "Let's now drink to Winston Churchill." And then raise our glasses to Winston Churchill, and let's lower our glasses to the Nazis. And others.
When you were a house guest, you say both here at Windsor, overnight stay, what were they called? Dine and sleeps, I think.
Dine and sleep was
very
here
posh sleepover.
Yeah, yes, very posh, of course. Being asked to sleep here is very posh. One of the other guests who was there the night that my wife and I were here had a canaletto in his bedroom. Well, that's pretty posh.
That is pretty posh. Right.
And beautiful.
And those events, I mean, I imagine, of course, because you already had this working relationship, not entirely nerve-wracking, but, you know, you have to be careful to do and say the right thing. Notoriously, we have heard throughout this week that the Queen was the consummate hostess, that she worked very hard to put her house guests at their ease. Did you experience that?
Absolutely. There was one classic occasion when my wife and I were coming to stay the night, or the weekend actually, and the British Airways lost my wife's luggage. So she was crestfallen, as you can imagine.
I can.
But we arrived, and the Queen came to the door and said, "I hear you've lost your luggage. I'm terribly sorry. But I've tried to arrange with the other ladies' guests and ladies in waiting and others to find some clothes for you." And so they did. And my wife had a very nice shirt from a lady in waiting and a skirt from someone else and a beautiful belt from a Polish maid.
Wonderful.
So it was fantastic.
Tell me then what your thoughts were today when you were watching the service, and not necessarily what do you expect them to be, but what is your sort of state of mind as somebody who is saying goodbye to somebody who was dear to them and who they knew?
I think the whole thing has been quite astonishingly beautiful and emotional, not just for me, but I think the emotion of the whole country has been extraordinary to see over the last week. It's because people loved her. She'd been here for 70 years and she loved us. And what you've seen, I think, is a mixture of grief and gratitude on the part of the people in this last 7 days, and it's just fantastic, and it's very, very well deserved. The other thing, I think, which was mentioned several times in the service by the Archbishop and others, is that the Queen didn't think this was the end. She believes in resurrection. And I found, when I was doing my research, a lovely remark that she made in a speech in Australia, an Aboriginal proverb, which she said was enduring. And the proverb said, "We are in this time and place for a short time, to learn, to observe, to love, and then we go home."
It's a beautiful thought. William Shawcross, we thank you very much for sharing your memories and sharing all your thoughts, and it was very interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, to be chosen as the Sovereign's Piper is a great honour. Anita, I think, is joined now by somebody who has held that role. Anita.
Yes, I'm with Jim Motherwell, who was appointed Piper to the Sovereign in 1997. What does that mean, Jim? What was the job?
The role of the job, you play the bagpipes every morning underneath the Queen's window from 9 till 9:15. Then you pack them away. Then you go and collect the Queen when she comes down from her private apartments at the lift, and you just stay with her, regarding what she's doing, interviews, visits, investitures. You basically work all day with her. And then when you're finished, you take her back round to the lift and she goes back upstairs to her private apartment.
What an incredible job to have.
It was very surreal.
Every single day you would play a tune on the bagpipe, same tune every day?
No, you had not to repeat the tunes all week, and you get a lot of tunes into 15 minutes on the bagpipes.
Did you ever get requests?
Yeah, the Queen's got her favourite tunes, a lot of them. A couple that Pipe Major Burns, who's the present Queen's Piper, played today. And she used to ask for a tune called Dovecote Park because she remembered it from she was a princess at the end of the war.
And then you go up to Balmoral as well?
Balmoral's the best part of the year because I've got loads of duties, or I had loads of duties to do at Buckingham Palace. But once you get up to Balmoral, you play the bagpipes in the morning, you play at dinner in the evening, and during the day you would go out horse riding, shooting, practicing your military training in case you ended up back in the regiment.
Not a bad life.
Yeah,
now,
okay.
One of the most poignant moments in the funeral service was when the Piper played.
Oh, that was for me big time because the Piper, Pipe Major Paul Burns, he's a very good player, but he's young and he's... I remember what that feeling was like, and I was more nervous for him today than I was when I played the Queen Mother out the church when she passed away nearly 20 years ago.
He did an amazing job though.
He did a fantastic job.
So if I were to ask you one enduring memory of the Queen, what would it be?
My wife was hurt in an accident at work in London, and she was quite badly hurt. And I had to take time off, compassionate time off, and then when I went back to work, the Queen asked how my wife was and how she was coping. And I said, there's no long-term injuries, but she's covered in bruises. So the Queen said, wait there. She went back upstairs in the lift, came back down and gave me a little bottle of Anika to put on my wife's bruises. So Trish was very happy with that.
Such compassion.
Yeah, that's the word, compassion. She's a very compassionate lady.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to hear your memories. And what does it mean to be here today, Jim?
Oh, it's very special. I mean, when I saw on the news and the TV that the Queen had died, that's all it said, the Queen dies. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but this is lovely doing this, seeing all this, the pageantry. It just brings my job back into the forefront of my head again.
Jim, thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
Beautiful memories. Well, there is a unique bond between the monarch and the armed forces, of course. To tell us more, I am joined by Sir Sebastian Roberts, former Major General of the Household Division, and Sir David Cannadine has joined us again. Thank you to you both. Sir Sebastian, if I can come to you first of all, what are your thoughts on a day like today?